Poetry Book Club for AAPI Heritage Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we are doing Your Wound, My Garden by Alok Menon. They are a non-binary, genderqueer South Asian poet, activist, and educator. And yeah, that's why I chose this book, because it's Asian American month, and I'll be choosing the same book next month as well, partly because it's Pride Month and they're queer, so it still fits, and also because the bookstore still hasn't been able to acquire the books. I'm kind of giving them more time. And so I'll start by reading the title poem from the book, Your Wound, My Garden, and the title poem is Your Wound is My Garden. And in fact, I used the last line of this poem as the last line of one of my poems as well. So this is called Your Wound is My Garden. I am not interested in legitimacy. Legitimacy is a circus that requires me to convince others what already is. I have more important things to do with my time. Does the ground have to authenticate itself to the feet? Does water have to substantiate itself to the tongue? I have nothing to prove. My dignity is not up for debate. I accept myself. And that is not only enough, it is everything. Contrary to popular belief, I am not a character in your novel. I'm not an actor in your TV show. I'm not a statue in your courtyard. I belong firmly and irrevocably to myself. The only opinion about my appearance that matters is my own. I used to think that if I toned it down, I would be taken more seriously. But then I realized you will always find a way to discredit me. We both know this was never about what I looked like. It was always about what you felt. You cannot bear to see it, how I've made home here in your shame. I regret to inform you that the house of mirrors you have erected is not a home. You sculpt the world in your image because you need proof that what you see in the mirror is real. You could not accept yourself, so you made up history, science, identity to disguise your own self-doubt. I see behind the mask. Beneath every supremacy lives insecurity. Each insult is an invitation to quicksand, and I refuse to take the bite. It is not my responsibility to rescue you from your self-imposed quarantine from humanity. You don't know who you are without me. I know who I am without you. This is why you hate me. This is why I love you. Your wound is my garden. I found life here in the places you have left. For that, watch me bloom.
Ooh. That's such a good line. Oh, that's such a good poem.
Yes. So Iris says that is not only enough, it is everything. That's an amazing line.
Everything, yes.
And then, ooh, I needed to hear this one. Yeah.
One of my favorite.
So we got Brenda over here.
Hey, everyone.
Book club guest. Yeah.
I am hanging out with Kundan today in Tustin, and it's a beautiful day and a beautiful garden.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite line, where it's I made my home in your shame, I think is how it was put.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I belong irrevocably to myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I needed to hear that this morning because so much messaging is displaces ourself from ourself. I have a line in one of my own poems that says there's no greater exile than the self from the self. And I think that with this particular piece, Your Wound is My Garden, I mean, it's such a powerful image.
Right.
And reclamation. So often we talk about our own wounds, and here the poet is talking about the garden, you know?
Yeah.
Completely reversing that and spinning it on its head. I think that's really powerful.
Exactly.
Hey, Iris.
Hi, Iris. So, because I think it speaks to the oneness too, because my womb is actually our womb.
Right.
So that's why our womb is our God.
Right. It's.
Yeah.
I think it speaks of the transmutation. I use that word quite a bit because our wounds, our trauma, our hurts, we have the power to transmute them into a thing of beauty. You know, our lives, or else what other choice do we have for our lives?
Right.
You know, I'm going to choose beauty just like the poet here absolutely has.
Right. Yeah.
And you should check out this book. The book is glossy, full color. It's like opening a fashion magazine. Just incredible.
It has these amazing pictures of the poet, in addition to their poetry. And even those pictures are a form of reclamation, right? In a world where you're not supposed to look like this, especially if they think you're a man, then, so for this person to openly include pictures is itself a form of resistance. In fact, there is another poem about that, which I think I'll read next. It's called Grammar Lessons, and as somebody who has to keep correcting people on my pronouns, I really relate to this next poem called Grammar Lessons. It looks beautiful. Definitely gonna get that. Yeah. In fact, I think it's only available on the author's website and also on Instagram shop. That's why even this bookstore is having a difficult time getting it. And so they've emailed the author and they're waiting for the direct buy link from the author.
It's a boutique book.
Yeah, it's a boutique book.
Right, which I love.
Yeah, it's very like glossy, like a magazine, right? And it's only $12, which is a really good deal for like a glossy picture poetry book. In fact, I actually bookmarked that poem, Grammar Lessons. So, yeah, and for everybody on the live, you can stay in the comments, or if you want to, you can request to be on the live and discuss it with us. You know, I kind of want this to be more of a hybrid event. And one of the reasons for me even doing a hybrid event is an act of reclamation and resistance. You know, for me, even though the pandemic was bad in many ways, there was one blessing in disguise, which was that a lot of things that were previously not accessible to me suddenly became accessible. That should have been accessible from the beginning, but because of ableism and classicism, you know, it wasn't, right? Like suddenly, because of the pandemic, we got open mics on Zoom and Instagram Live, which could always have been done, but people didn't do it. But when they had no choice, they started doing it. And for me, as a person who doesn't drive at all, you know, even something that's an hour away, like Los Angeles, can be too far away. Like, you know, and depending on like how much money I have during a given month, even something that's 20 minutes away might be too far away if I don't have money for an Uber that month, right? With the bus, it's like it takes like 20 minutes becomes an hour. And so like when I was living in LA, like, you know, I lived in LA for about 6 months where everything is sprawled out. There were some events that I would go sometimes, and sometimes I couldn't go, especially if I don't have a ride. And so this was way back in 2015, I requested that I be able to attend via Zoom sometimes, and they said no. And it was like so weird, right? And then by 2020, everything's on Zoom,
right?
You know, so that's why I do hybrid events now, where whenever I do a local in person, I also get on Instagram Live so that people who are far away, or even those who are close who cannot come for whatever reason, they still have access to this, you know. So yeah,
it's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an accessibility and inclusivity issue for me. It's not just a fancy thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So this next one is called Grammar Lessons. My first word was irony. Growing up a boy, they called me too feminine. When I finally claimed femininity as my own, they called me a man. These are grammar lessons. Some of us are only allowed to be taught, never to think. When they insist that our pronouns violate grammar, to some degree they are right. Grammar is less about the mechanics of language, more about the monopoly of it. It's not just about who can speak, but who gets to speak. He who controls the word controls the world. He who controls the word controls the world. What they mean is, don't object to remaining object. You are not a subject unless you subject yourself to me. In school, we were taught that basic sentence structure includes a subject and a predicate. How naive I was to believe that if you just found the right words and put them in the appropriate order, it would necessarily lead to understanding. How devastating. Meaning is not an equal opportunity employer. Well, meaning is not an equal opportunity employer. I studied so hard. I choreographed my tongue to sculpt the inchoate sounds of my soul into language. What a tragedy to learn on the other side. It doesn't matter if you have all the right words when they think you have the wrong body. Subject, predicate, power.
Ooh.
In order to be understood, you must have power. What this means is that we both could launch the same words and they would still land in different places. What this means is that so often their words are prioritized more than our lives. Well, their words are prioritized more than our lives. What this means is that in order to understand us, you must wait. I don't think I can express that here. Meet me somewhere else. The body is three-dimensional language. Beauty is the harshest editor. I could spend the rest of my life articulating every detail, every grain, every follicle, and still they would not understand because of what I look like. No, because of what they feel about what I look like. Because of what they feel about what I look like. A grammar lesson. If you were to scream in outer space, no one would hear you. Sound waves can travel through an empty vacuum. Only you would be able to hear yourself because the sound waves would still travel through your body. This is what it feels like to be brown, trans, femme, and alive. Oh.
What was the line where it said, I'm not allowed to think, only to be thought?
Only to be thought, yeah.
Oh, that one blew me away. And then you responded to something, a line. I saw you have, the poem has so many layers, and you've obviously have read this book.
Yeah.
Many times.
That's why this has a bookmark. This poem has a bookmark.
Right. But there was a line there where you were like, whoa, something hit you on another level. I was curious about.
Oh, the one, meaning is not an equal opportunity.
Yeah. What was it that you, it seemed like an epiphany was hitting in that moment, like a lightning bolt for you as the reader.
Yeah, it's related to that he who controls the word controls the world, and how meaning, meaning is in the control and the eye of whoever is in power. That they, and that's why I call this narrative warfare, right? It's not just a physical warfare with armies. It's not just it's a psychological narrative warfare as well.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is it's really too expensive to have to keep controlling people by force, by physical force.
Mm-hmm.
With these armies, it is much easier if we just control each other. It's much easier for the people in power. And so that's why they wage a culture war or narrative warfare instead, so that we would end up being spokespeople and agents of empire, right?
With our own language.
With our own language, exactly. That's why I said earlier that even when it comes to books written by racialized people, I've come to the point where if it's, especially for like books by Hindu and Indian authors, I feel like if it's too famous, I just look at it with suspicion, because I feel like, because the truth is they only allow a seat at the table if you act as an agent of empire or imperialism, So, and that's what I call, whiteness and brown face, right? The technical term among our people is coconut, because there's a brown outside but white inside. But yeah, that's how I feel about it, So, they say that it takes only 12 dogs to shepherd 5,000 sheep, and they do that. How humans do it with each other, how the colonizers do it to us, is through narrative warfare, through the manipulation of meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
I read a quote yesterday that said something about, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly.
But what about the pastor in sheep's clothing? And I think it was someone that was shedding light on the corruption that the empire within religious organizations,
exactly,
in this particular case, Christianity, has. And I'm thinking about that term that you just used, narrative warfare, how even our own mouths could be as simple as negative self-talk.
Exactly.
Right? Which I think the poet is unpacking a lot of that negative self-talk, and then resisting utterly with everything, with color, with vibrancy, with their language, with this beautiful book. And I think that's powerful. That is how we have to resist. It's on the personal level, and it's absolutely political. We were just talking earlier about how the personal is political. You have a T-shirt that says, what does it say again?
It says be political. Actually, I'm wearing that T-shirt. Yes. So, here we go. So, it says be political. And then on this side, you have Yuri Kochiyama, who was a Japanese-American activist and is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, so that's why I'm wearing it. Yuri Kochiyama was a Japanese American activist, also a friend of Malcolm X, and she and Malcolm X, in fact, worked together to create coalitions between Asian American activists and Black American activists. That's why I put this picture together with a picture of Newport Justice, who is a leader of BLM-NY, Black Lives Matter New York. So I put those two portraits together. So I literally painted both. So with my own hands, using 3D fabric paint directly from the bottle, and says "Be political." Yeah.
That's cool. And for anyone who says, "Oh, I don't like politics," well, then you don't like people, because anything having to do with people, by definition, is political always.
Yeah. In fact, in one of my poems, I went further. I said the personal is political because the political becomes personal.
It absolutely does, yeah. We can see that in our world today. It's not just this issue that you can't touch. It is real lives, real people being affected by guns, by, anti-choice legislation, hate crime. I mean, just so many things that we can discuss. That it's real life people. Pardon the term, cross in the crossfires of these things, and it's dangerous, and it's tyranny, and it needs to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this. I don't have my hands yet on this book. I'm going to special order the boutique book on Alok's website for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's powerful, and I think it's I'm not a trans person, and yet I can feel
you can relate to some of it. Yeah,
it resonates because body shaming in my culture, like the inferiority of well, not just in my culture, in so many cultures, the inferiority of femmes, of women, colorism.
Right. And even that's a legacy of colonialism.
Absolute legacy of colonialism, and it's often, to go back to the narrative warfare, it can come out of our own mouths.
Exactly.
It can come out of our own thoughts. And so to disrupt that, to disrupt that warfare against our own bodies, against our own spirits is vitally important.
Yeah, yeah. And I say it's a legacy of colonialism because it's actually not only a legacy, it's ongoing. Like right now in India, Fair and Lovely and other skin whitening companies, 99% of which are all white Western corporations. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which means colorism is not only alive in India, it's profitable. But who is it profitable for? It's profitable for white people.
Exactly.
For white corporations. In fact, there's only one Indian company that sells skin whitening creams, and even they are a very recent, very small company. I think they started in the last 10 or 20 years. So everything else is like these white Western corporations. And assimilation was their biggest weapon. And then Iris says, we have no choice but to be political. Colonialism did a damn good job of ensuring that. Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's why I wrote a poem about the Crooked Rim experiment, which I want to explain again, which speaks to what you said about how we carry on, we do colonialism job by policing ourselves and each other with the colorism, with the fat phobia, all of that, and even with the gender binary and the homophobia and all of that, because in the Crooked Room experiment really shows how it's done, right? So this was explained in the book that I'm reading currently. I'm halfway through it, The Three Mothers by Anna Malika Tubbs. It's a biography of the mothers of James Baldwin, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X. So Bernice Baldwin, Luther King, and Malcolm Little. And so in the book, Anna explains the Crooked Room experiment, which is that if you put a person in a crooked room where all of the objects are crooked, including the chairs and the floor, right? And if you have the person sit on that crooked chair, they will claim and they will really believe that they're sitting straight even when they're tilted 35 degrees, as long as they match all the other objects in the room. That's crazy, right?
It is, yeah.
But it's a metaphor for the harmful psychological impact of systemic racism, even on us as racialized people. Not just on how white people and the colonizers treat us, but even on our own psychology.
How we treat each other.
Right. So, because we're doing their job for them.
Right.
When we do the colorism, when we do the fat phobia, when we reinforce the gender binary, we're literally reinforcing the crooked room.
Which is such a hateful strategy.
Exactly.
And who knows if there was like a great mastermind, but either way, it has been effective. I think, which is why, it's so important to speak it, to speak about it, to point it out, to dust the cobwebs off of this ancient toxic thing.
Right.
For each other, for ourselves, catch ourselves, apologize, when necessary, and just be different, and interrupt the thought process, because it's so wild to me how ingrained it is in our own minds and our own spirit. So it's like that. It's like a mental, neurological colonization that's happening too.
Exactly.
Definitely a spiritual colonization where our world is crooked. Our world's been topsy-turvy. And we've been told, but I don't know, the veil is thin right now.
Yeah.
People are calling shit out all the time. I think a lot of the poets are doing it. You know, poets are being prophetic and speaking truth to power.
That's why I'm doing it with a lot of my recent poetry. It's a reclamation.
It is a reclamation. With my book, so much of it is very, very personal, and people have told me, why don't you write a political poem? I'm like, everything in here is political.
Exactly.
Everything is personal. And for me, I found it important to start with from my experience, from myself, because if I can't reclaim myself in the totality of who I am, and remember my ancestors and remember them and see them in me, then how am I possibly going to make an impact in my world, in the world around me? Exactly. I won't be able to. So for me, that's why I found it important to start with the self, so that I can move with integrity with my community, with the wider global community.
Exactly. Yeah. Would you like to read another poem from the book?
Sure. Do you have a recommendation? Should I just do bibliomancy?
Yes, bibliomancy.
We're going to do some bibliomancy. Do you want to explain really quick what bibliomancy is? I don't know if anyone is familiar.
Bibliomancy is it's an open practice because, and that's really important because a lot of divination practices are colonized. Even tarot, I feel like I only do get my tarot readings from Romani practitioners, and I try not to get it from non-Romani because the Romani are oppressed to this day in Europe. Their children are kidnapped and trafficked by the governments in Europe, even to this day, for just living their lives. The Romani are what people, they use the G word even to this day, GYPSY, to call them. Whereas bibliomancy is open, it's an open practice, meaning it doesn't belong to any culture. And basically you ask yourself a question, or you don't even have to ask yourself a question if you don't want to. You just pick a random page from a book, and that page that you're reading is what you need to hear right now. Basically, that's bibliomancy. Yeah.
So the question, I feel like I've been doing bibliomancy for much of my life. I would often do it with sacred scriptures from my tradition. So I used to call it Russian roulette. That was probably a dangerous way to say it, but maybe not, because I would use the Bible that way when I was younger. So the question I asked right now of this book, Your Wound, My Garden, is, what do we need to hear right now? What does the collective need to hear right now? And the poem I went to is actually right next to the poem prior to Grammar Lessons that Kundan already read. This one is called Disassociation, and I'll show you the way the title is written in a shape, and the beautiful, gorgeous photo that's included. Disassociation. And from the first sentence, you're going to see why we needed to hear this. People often ask me what it was like to grow up in small town Texas.
What?
Ooh, that went right to my heart. Truthfully, I don't remember. When I look at childhood photos, it's like I'm looking at someone else. The only evidence that I have that I was real is other people's stories. I scour through every stray diary entry like a private investigator, trying to find myself there. But no amount of home videos, yearbooks, newspaper clippings bring me back to life. I spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to be alive. In the mechanical sense, yes, my lungs, they were breathing. My heart, it was beating, but it's up for debate if I was living. I can't tell when it happened, but at some point I began to vanish. It's like I was watching my life from the sky as an omniscient narrator. It wasn't, I am hurting. It was, look, they hurt this person. Nothing that happened to me happened to me. I became the apostrophes themselves, floating above, always at a distance. I learned how to exist in two places at once. Time travel was a Thursday afternoon. Because the present didn't belong to me, I lived in the future. Disassociation both saved my life and made me lose it. What a strange sensation, the grief of being alive to mourn your own death. My Saturn return lassoed me back to my hometown last year. It was the longest I had been back since I was a child. Morning after morning, I would wake up and look at the same God-forsaken ceiling. Sometimes I would take long walks hoping that it would all come back to me, that I would come back to me, a sudden flash like in the movies. It never came. But I can tell you what it did. I didn't find me. I forgave me. In one story, we disassociate because we're broken. Loud-ass planes. In one story, we disassociate because we're broken. In another, we do precisely because we want to heal. My body fought for me before I could. It innovated and insulated me, creating the space for me to daydream myself into existence. Oh, I love that line. I can't pinpoint when it happened, but I began to plant gratitude everywhere in myself. I felt shame, filled lack with love. I may not know what I lost, but I am here to feel it. For the first time, not I, experienced this pain. Thank God, my beautiful child, they gifted me the ability to feel. Poem.
Wow.
Ooh.
That was amazing.
That was amazing. I'm just like soaking in that one.
Iris said, yeah, this is the one. Mm-hmm. Especially since with the terrorism attack that happened in Texas. It's so like, we're so insane.
Small town Texas. Yeah, we're in alignment right now. I'm getting goosebumps.
That's the power of bibliomancy. It went right to it.
It went
right to the current events.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what's funny though? I had been looking through the book while you were explaining bibliomancy, and the first poem that my eyes landed on, and it didn't resonate, but I kind of did. It was about airplanes.
Oh wow!
And it was funny because we're right near an airport, John Wayne Airport, and it flew right above us, and it was like, oh my God, bibliomancy is mocking me right now.
Right.
Or has a sense of humor.
Right.
But I was like, that's not the one, and then I opened it again, and it was this poem. I was like, oh my God, this is the one.
Yeah. Earlier, Iris said, my works are reminding me of how political I am as well. I've been confronting my anger lately. There's a big trope of the angry black woman that I'm trying to embrace. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Embrace.
That's what I call reverse victimhood, when the white person will say that you're the bully for calling out their racism and their colonialism and their sexism, right? And that's reverse victimhood. They pretend they're the victim and that you're the bully. Right, and they will use whatever, they will weaponize every other marginalization they have to do so. You know, like even though their whiteness comes first, right? It doesn't matter if they're disabled, it doesn't matter if they're queer, they're white first. And they pretend they don't understand that, you know, because they're so stuck to being a victim, right? And then ironically, they call us having a victim mentality.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, like, and we're being gaslit, y'all.
We're being gaslit,
We're being gaslit, and then sometimes that, if we're already struggling, it really does make a person second guess themselves. And, you know, it can affect our mental health. I mean, and we're already been affected. But you're right, Iris. I think to embrace the rage and the anger.
Yeah. Because I've been called angry all the time too. Every time I call out racism, I've been called hostile, angry, violent.
You got locked out of somewhere recently because of it. Facebook.
Yeah, in fact. So this is not just fun and games. Like, it literally impacts your finances too. Because I don't even know if I'm still locked out. Facebook locked me out of doing any fundraisers for at least a year. After, like, I think 1 or 2 strikes for calling out racism, because they interpret calling out racism as hate speech against white people. So the irony of that is crazy. And that means reverse victimhood is built into the algorithm, into the community standards, where they don't distinguish between racism and calling out racism.
So that can be filtered, right, and identified.
Right.
And yet someone with with these like war machines, right? With these rifles, can filter right through. You know, a lot of these white terrorist organizations can just slip through the cracks. And I've heard, you know, the tech companies say, well, we can't identify everybody, but yet, like you mentioned, racialized people getting called out and put in Facebook jail or whatever technology jail, you know, they're getting filtered. So the mechanism is there, and that is being weaponized and used against us.
Exactly, yeah. In fact, more recently on Malcolm X Day, ironically, again, the irony of that, right? It would have been his birthday, Malcolm X Day. I posted a quote by Malcolm X on how the white liberal is more dangerous than the white conservative. And within a few minutes, Instagram informed me that they had removed my comment. And by the way, in that comment, not only did I put his quote, I even said, hey, it's Malcolm X Day, it would have been his birthday. I even included that comment. So the audacity of removing that comment, despite me even letting them know it's his birthday, is incredible. Removing it for hate speech, right? It's not even their first time. They did it to Dr. King's quote as well, also on his own birthday. When a black woman named Sonia Renee Taylor, the author of My Body Is Not an Apology, posted the famous Dr. King quote about how, a very similar quote about how the white moderate is the greatest stumbling block to justice than even the Ku Klux Klan. That quote was also removed by Instagram for hate speech.
Right. It's just to go back to your point about what's palatable, what's not palatable from racialized people, racialized voices. You know, it's all the more reason to build community outside of these technological spaces, as good as they are and as much access as they give us to places we wouldn't be. To be able to connect locally as much as possible is critical, right? To get word out and use other mechanization, Underground Railroad kind of stuff.
Right? Exactly. So when they informed me about that, there was also an option to request a review. So I clicked, they were like, did we make a mistake? Request for review. So I clicked the request for review. And then in addition to that, I posted another comment in which I directly tagged Instagram itself. And I said, hey, you know, you're removing Malcolm X's own quote on his own birthday. You're only showing your racism. I literally said that.
Right.
So 7 hours later, with no apology, no acknowledgement, they didn't even tell me anything. I went back to the post and they quietly restored the comment.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't even tell me that they restored it though. I had to go look at it.
Look for it.
Yeah.
Which is madness. And it's like, gotta laugh before we end up in the fetal position. That's
yes, we laugh because we don't want to cry.
Iris says, revolution is quiet and loud. That's why they deleted it.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah.
Major policing going on. But someone also flagged it. And are we policing each other?
Exactly.
You know, who is policing us?
That's
Show
the
yourselves.
point. Yeah. Someone must have reported it for Instagram to see that.
Unless they have very specific filters.
Right.
For specific words.
Right.
I've seen a lot of artivists misspell words deliberately. I see that a lot.
I do too, all the time.
Yeah.
So that was the one time in like 3 years where I decided not to misspell it. Because it's a direct quote and it's a famous quote. And also I almost wanted to challenge Instagram to do it, to dare it to do it, you know. And they did. And they did it. They fell right into the bait.
Thank you, Instagram.
Like you showed yourself, Instagram. Right? Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah. Because I use spellings like HUITE or even just euphemisms like bland or colorless people or hueless people. Oh, by the way, speaking of reverse victimhood, I used the term hueless people on a Facebook comment, and there was a white guy who calls it a racial slur.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, dude, do you even know why I'm using this euphemism?
Right. Oh, my Lord.
I was like, It's because of people like you that I have to use this term in the first place. That's the irony of it.
Talking about showing yourself.
Yeah, talking about showing yourself.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Whew.
So I have 2 more poems I wanted to read here, but you could read another one while I go to the restaurant.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then it'll be my turn.
Yeah.
I'm taking over Kundan's Instagram. Even the term grammar Nazi that people use online is one way we've casually integrated that policing into our everyday lives. So true. So true. Okay, I'm going to do another bibliomancy moment here. What do we need to hear today? Impossible Lives by Alok. Your Wound, My Garden. Poetry by Alok. We live impossible lives. Miracles are not exceptional. They are everywhere. In order for me to be here writing this to you now, for you to be there reading it, a billion things had to go right, and a billion things wrong. This was not supposed to happen, and it is. We are not supposed to happen. And we do. If that's not a testament to the gruesome charm of being alive and meaning it, I'm not sure what is. Impossible is enlisted as a foot soldier for the status quo. Its purpose is to reinscribe the political coordinates of existence, stifle any attempt to stray anywhere else. When they say that's impossible, they mean don't imagine otherwise. And when you do just that, they will dismiss you as naive and idealistic.